I'm joined by Bart Oosterveld. He's director of the Global Business and Economics Program at the Atlantic Council. Bart, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Your thoughts on Conte's resignation?
I think it sets in motion a fairly uncertain period of time. I think, as was mentioned in the introduction, this will now go to the president. He has a few options, and he could push for a caretaker government, which would need a majority support in the parliament. There could be new elections of uncertain outcome, and all of this comes at a time that Italy is gearing up for a budget battle with Brussels. So it leads to a fairly uncertain fall, difficult time for European policymakers as they also deal with Brexit.
Crystal ball, what's your prediction will happen, and which of those options is the best for Italy in your opinion?
I think my prediction would be that there will be new elections of uncertain outcome and a difficult negotiation this fall with Brussels about the debt and the deficit.
We've been doing stories about the migration issues facing Italy, the boats headed there from Northern Africa. How is all that figured in domestically into the country's political debates?
It's been a significant factor in the rise of Salvini's popularity and the Lega's success in the recent European elections, where they became the largest party in Italy. The anti-immigration stand, the anti-Brussels stands, the anti-Euro stands has really benefited him in domestic politics, and he has no reason to back down from any of those.
This political marriage, this coalition, was populist parties, but really on opposite political spectrums. Was it doomed for destruction?
Well, in a sense, Italy has had over 60 coalition governments since the end of World War II, so in the sense, having lasted a bit over a year, it's not surprising that any Italian coalition government would fall. As you point out, these are populist parties that found each other on the fringes of politics, and they had a few things in common: Euroscepticism, anti-corruption planks in their plans, and populist stands, direct democracy notions. So yes, in a sense, it was hard to see areas of policy where they might agree, aside from being skeptical about Europe.
Some people often say that Italy is really a bunch of different countries bulked in together. Talk about the economic stagnation facing the country, and I'm curious, does it differ regionally?
It does, and that's an important factor in Italian domestic politics. I think Italy as a whole has not grown its economy meaningfully in the last 20 years. But if you take that aggregate picture, it masks significant regional differences, like you say. In the north, where the Lega has historically found most of its support, the economy is quite vibrant, quite strong, export-driven, comparable in some ways to the German economy. It's the southern part of the country that struggles most economically. One other factor that ties the entire economy together, I have to say, though, is very weak banks in both the north and the south that are a significant risk to capital markets and to economic stability in Italy.
There were efforts in Europe to reform banks. Did that not happen in Italy?
Those are important efforts, and they're ongoing. That project is incomplete. The one thing that undercuts those efforts in Italy is that the domestic banks hold a lot of Italian sovereign debt. So to the extent that Italian sovereign debt becomes more risky, it has a direct effect on the banks, which is what some people refer to as the doom loop.
And that, of course, has a direct effect on the rest of Europe. How does Italy's health affect the EU as a whole?
It's critically important, especially to the other countries in the Eurozone. Italy is the third largest economy in Europe. It has debt of well over 130% of GDP, the second highest in the Eurozone after Greece. And Italy is of a size that it would be hard to imagine how European policymakers could assist it the way they assisted Greece or Ireland or Portugal. There's probably ways that they can do that for a while, but the numbers are such that a crisis in Italy, whether it's the banks not being able to fund themselves in the market or the country not able to fund itself in the market, would have significant spillover effects to the other parts of the Eurozone.
Economically speaking, what's your outlook for reform? What do you think needs to be done?
I think, and the IMF and others have pointed this out as well, the Italian economy is structurally underperforming due to its labor laws, due to its pension provisions, due to the fact that for decades now, pensioners have been shielded from economic impact of necessary reforms. Unemployment is structurally too high, and labor markets are too rigid. And so all those things would need to be addressed, and it's probably not this government or the next government that's going to be able to do that.
Quite the optimist there. Bart Oosterveld, we'll have to leave it there from the Atlantic Council. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.